What's up guys, Matty Mo here, and this is the HTC One M9. And when you first look at it, you're probably saying it looks a lot like the HTC One M8 and the HTC One M7 from 2 years ago. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's still one of the nicest looking smartphones on the market, but they have made some slight changes. They've refined it, and more importantly, they've changed a lot in the inside. So without wasting any more time, let's hop into my review of the HTC One M9. HTC has decided to keep the same design philosophy for the third time in a row, an all-metal design that looks great, and for the most part, I'm okay with that. In my opinion, it's still one of the better looking phones out there, but this time, instead of using an all-metal unibody frame, they've actually split the phone into different metal pieces. This is the gunmetal gray version, and it looks like they took a metal phone and placed it inside a metal case. It looks great and it shows two different color tones. In the front you have one color of gray, and the lining of the phone is all black. The overall feel of the phone has changed as well. With the One M8, it felt like actual metal in your hand, but with the M9, the back has been brushed and refined, giving a glossy look and feel. I personally prefer the feel of the One M9 because it no longer feels slippery in your hand. Thankfully, button placement has changed. The One M8 had the power button on the top, which made it quite difficult to reach. But now it's placed on the side below the volume rocker for easier access. And of course, you can always just double tap the screen to wake up your phone. A lot of tech reviewers complain that putting the volume and power button on the right side of the phone caused a lot of confusion. They found themselves pressing the volume button to wake up the screen when they were trying to actually push the power button. Now, I picked this phone up and after a couple of hours, I completely got used to it. Don't get me wrong, it would have made a lot more sense to put the volume controls on the left side and leave the power button on the right side. But after a couple of hours, you're gonna get used to it right away and it's really not a big deal. You still have your micro SD card above the volume controls, and on the left side is your SIM tray. The IR blaster remains at the top, and on the bottom is a micro USB port and audio jack. Flipping it over onto the back, you no longer have dual cameras, and instead it's only one, which we'll get to shortly. Overall, build quality and design was working for HTC, so they decided not to change what seems to be working best for them. Moving on to display and speakers. We are now in the second generation of QHD on smartphones, and HTC has decided to stick with a 1080p screen. It's an LCD3 screen, which is the same screen as the One M8, but the overall color quality has improved. I find the colors to be better than the previous year. Blacks and reds are darker, for example. Overall viewing angles are great, and because the screen is only 5 inches, you'll still get great pixel density. But of course, the highlight of the front of the phone is definitely those boom sound speakers. They are still the best on a smartphone and sounds awesome when consuming media, playing games, or just using the speakerphone. HTC has enabled Dolby Sound and allows you to choose between two different modes, music and theater. Theater definitely sounds louder, but music sounds cleaner. Finally, one other change I would have liked to see is the removal of the HTC black bar. It adds unnecessary length when it could actually make the phone a lot shorter. Next up is software and performance, and inside is Qualcomm's latest Snapdragon 64-bit A10 chip. And for the most part, it's really fast. The experience was fast and fluid with no slowdowns, lag, or stutter while transitioning between menus and applications. It runs the most intensive games with ease, and it's what you'd expect from a flagship phone. Most of you are probably curious about whether or not this phone gets hot due to the issues surrounding the A10 chip. The phone does get hotter than other phones out there, but never to the point where it's uncomfortable. If you're playing games, charging the phone, or leaving the screen on for long periods of time, that's when it tends to heat up. But like I said before, it's not hot enough to really worry about. The phone is running Android 5.0.2 right out of the box, and there's no word on when it'll get the upgrade to 5.1. But on top of it, you have HTC's latest version of Sense 7.0, and a few changes have been made. Blink feed is much nicer than before, and I found myself using it from time to time to see what's trending on my social networks. One thing I didn't like is that HTC completely covered any stock Android visuals, except for the recent apps window where you can choose the carousel by enabling it. But the good news is if you don't like the way things look, HTC has added the ability to use different themes. The themes change the overall colors and icons, and is really a great way to make your phone feel new again. There's also a new widget that guesses what apps you use based on your location. I didn't really find it useful, but after a while it started to do a pretty good job at guessing what I needed. Moving on to battery life and storage, and inside is a 2840 mAh battery, which is actually a bit bigger than the battery in the One M8. The overall battery life was decent to good, and I had no problems making it through the whole day and still having 20 to 25% left before going to bed. I would tell you guys how much screen time I got, but the battery life setting omits this, which I found a little strange, but I felt like the usual 3.5 to 4 hours of on-screen time. Charging the phone is great because it also now supports quick charging, and you should be able to get about 60% in 30 minutes. But you'll have to go out and buy a separate power adapter because HTC didn't include a quick charging power adapter in the box. And I also want to mention one more thing. This phone does not support wireless charging, which I feel should be standard by now. I also just want to mention that the phone comes with 3GB of RAM and 32GB of internal storage space. And if that's not enough space for you, the micro SD card slot holds up to 120GB of extra storage space. Moving on to the camera, which is actually the most debated topic about this device. And last year on the M8 they had the ultra pixel camera, which has 4 megapixels and did well under low light, but you'd still end up with not so great looking photos. And generally this was the biggest complaint about last year's phone. So to remedy this, HTC has stuck a 20 megapixel camera on the back of the phone and moved the ultra pixel camera to the front, which takes decent photos for those who love selfies. And you're probably thinking, okay, great, 20 megapixels, it has to take good photos. Sure, you're gonna have more detail and sharper photos, but unfortunately this is one of those situations where more megapixels doesn't mean better photos. To give everyone an idea how this camera compares to other smartphones, the latest report from DxOMark pegs the HTC One M9 camera as the 22nd best camera you can get on a smartphone. To put this in perspective, the Galaxy S3 and iPhone 4S comes in 18 and 19. These phones are almost 4 years old. The good news is the autofocus speed is really fast, but that's probably the only great thing about the camera. It didn't perform well under low light, and photos shot during the day were often either flat, dark, or underexposed. Now I'm not trying to say this is a terrible camera. You'll still get some decent shots, but that's the thing, the shots will only be decent. Other good news is you can shoot 4K video, and the audio recorded sounds nice and crisp. The bad news is the 4K video doesn't look good, and reminds me of upscaled video from a lower resolution. With the competition putting their main focus on having the best camera on a smartphone, it seems HTC has taken a step back once again. Finally, I just want to mention call quality was good, there were no dropped calls, and the receiving party sounded clear and vice versa. So what's the bottom line then? This phone has a good screen, amazing boom sound speakers, an awesome design which I still love and I still think it's one of the best designs on a smartphone. It provides a good user experience, and it also has great battery life and the ability to add an extra micro SD card if you need the external storage space. But the one area that this phone falls short is the camera. It's really not a good camera compared to some of the other flagship devices that have been released recently. Now if you love the HTC One line and you're coming from the M7, this is a great upgrade. But for those of you that are looking for a new flagship device in 2015, it's hard for me to recommend this device. So what do you guys think of the HTC One M9? And for those of you that have this phone, let me know what you like and dislike about this phone in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, don't forget to subscribe. And I'll see everybody in the next video.